2 years, 1 year, now 6 months. I think I'm finally starting to get the hang of this regular uploading.
Since the structure of Series 13 has been altered due to the pandemic, it's got me thinking that Doctor Who has stuck to its guns almost since its inception in the premise and structure, and it's really like one of the only outliers of week-to-week programming in the streaming age that we're in. Since the show returned to our screens in 2005, like the entire television landscape's changed. Binge watching's become the norm. Viewers much prefer to just box off a whole series of a show in one sitting and then move on to the next. Binge culture, it's not necessarily a new thing as much as people want you to believe it. You know, getting a DVD box set on Christmas Day and then watching it all on Boxing Day, you know, that's been common practice for a while. The only difference now is that shows are being actively made with binge watching in mind. I personally prefer not to binge. I'd rather watch it week to week because I feel like you can retain the information more, you can appreciate the show more than everything just becoming a blur. But I know I'm in the minority, and binge watching is what the majority of people are doing now. And with the decrease of week-to-week programming comes the increase of serialised productions. Audiences' watching patterns have changed. People are now more likely to want to invest in one long-form story rather than a completely new narrative week to week or episode to episode. What's interesting about this is, with a lot of TV changing around it, Doctor Who has, for the most part, stuck to its guns. It's stuck to its structure, that of new characters, location, plot each episode. You know, it's a formula that's worked since its inception in 1963. It's quite baffling that for almost 60 years, it's basically kept the same rough structure and idea. Why fix what isn't broke? It's one of the only shows that is actually able to change the setting every episode, every week. Changes built into the fabric of the show. But why hasn't the format of the show changed with the times? There's an interesting dynamic between Doctor Who and its fans. The DNA of the show is all about change all the time, yet its viewers seem to hate any sort of deviation from the norm. Doctor Who's a show that's also aimed at the casual viewer. You know, these are the members of the public who will dip in and out of the show and won't dive as deep into it as the Whovians among us. None of us really know who the casual viewers are, but we know they exist. They're the people who stopped watching when Peter Capaldi rode in on a tank playing the guitar in The Magician's Apprentice. And they're the people who can be heard saying, "It's not been the same since David Tennant left." Does anyone actually know one of these fabled casual viewers? Who knows? But they are out there, and they're an important component of the continued success of the show. One of the first times I heard of a backlash of sorts against any sort of serialised nature of the show was probably Series 6. Lots of complaints were made during Matt Smith and Stephen Moffat's second run on the show that the story was too confusing and hard to follow. I remember hearing the sentence, "I missed the last few episodes and didn't know what was going on," a lot of the time. I know the TV landscape has changed even since 2011 when that series aired. Even then, I doubt there were many shows that you'd be able to skip 3 episodes of and then blame the show for not making sense. Yes, I know Doctor Who is something of a different beast, but my point still stands. If someone told you that they didn't know what was going on in Breaking Bad,
and then they told you that they hadn't watched the last 4 episodes, you'd call them mad and go tell them to go watch those last 4 episodes. And while audiences are expected to be able to dip in and out of Who, I take slight issue when people say the show became too complicated because it required you to watch every episode of a series as a valid criticism of the Moffat era. It's not the showrunner's fault that you didn't watch an episode vital to the plot. If an episode from another era of the show, be that Doctor or showrunner, is where the vital information's coming from, then yes, it's up to the writer to make sure someone who wasn't watching 5 years ago, or heck, 50, is caught up and understands what's going on. But when it's in direct response to an episode in that specific era, I think the responsibility lies on the viewer. Then we get to 2018 and Chris Chibnall's now in charge of the show, and a lot of people didn't know what to expect from his run of the show, especially considering he hadn't written for the show for 5 years at this point. Personally, I expected a more serialised approach from Chibs, not only for the fact that he wrote the nation-grabbing Broadchurch. Like Breaking Bad, you wouldn't have dared miss an episode of Broadchurch as it went out. It was event viewing. It was the last show, bar anything written by Jed Mercurio, that made people on the masses make sure they were in and watching on broadcast. This is something I was certain he was going to bring over to his new style of Doctor Who, albeit not on the same scale as a Broadchurch. So call me shocked by the time Series 11 had finished and we had all new plots and villains throughout the whole run of the series, albeit Tim Shaw in the finale, and no classic or new series monsters that we'd seen before come back, bar the Daleks in the New Year special. The title sequence was even left out for 2 whole episodes. Were you playing at Chibs? Some loathed this new approach, while others praised Chibnall and his team for being inclusive to newcomers, or those who'd maybe rejoined after some time away. Will call me more shocked that by the time Series 12 rolled around, slower than a pre-80s Dalek trying to climb a flight of stairs, there were lore-heavy stories, old monsters galore, and more story arcs than you could shake a TARDIS at. At first, for me, it was quite jarring, going from one extreme to the other, a whiplash of sorts. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought it was genius from Chibnall, whether I like the change in approach or not. He brought people back to the show who maybe hadn't watched for years, and then hit them with the type of stories that they wouldn't want to miss next week for. Again, as with Series 11, viewers were split on whether this was the right approach, but it was flipped on should it have been as connected instead of being a new story every episode. And I still don't know which series I prefer. It's really strange. Normally, I know for the most part it's changed over the years, but normally when a series finishes, I'm like, well, I think that's better than that one in that particular era. I don't have a clue which one I prefer, because Series 11 at the time, I wasn't really gelling with it, but after having seen Series 12 and it being quite scattered in terms of what I thought the approach was, going back to Series 11, I appreciated the fact that it had one vision and it executed it. So I'm still flip-flopping. It's really odd. Will this alienate viewers? Will this stop people coming back next week? These are all questions that were being asked.
Yeah, but now we get to Series 13, and what's interesting about it is it's going to be different from the other 2 series by like necessity. You know, it's had to get 3 episodes cut off just so it can finish filming. And I think the interesting thing about it is a lot of people have said, oh, this means we're getting a Children of Earth, we're getting another Children of Earth. And I mean, that's not really what's going on. Children of Earth was planned and set out to be one story told over 5 episodes, whereas this was planned to be a normal series that has had to have episodes taken away. So I think people who are expecting this really serialised, smooth run are going to be disappointed. But it does raise the question whether it's going to be a better linked series or not. Like, if Ed Hine, Pete McTeague, those type of writers aren't in this series, were they before, and have they got rid of the worst 3 episodes, which seems unlikely how to go about navigating that one? Or have they gone, we have to get rid of these scripts to maximise getting the show finished on time? Like, have we potentially lost a really good episode? You know, I don't know. I mean, I don't think we're ever going to find out. We barely know anything about the behind the scenes of the episodes that we have got, let alone ones we haven't got, so I'm not holding my breath on that one. You know, there will be plenty of people who say Chris Chibnall doesn't know what he's doing because he didn't tie everything up perfectly in 110 run episode 2 years into his run. We have to wait how long to find out what happens? Down with the BBC, down with Chris Chibnall, Jodie Whittaker's the daughter of Satan. You know, it's all nonsense, of course. Most shows nowadays leave overarching plot threads from season to season. 1, to keep the audience interested and invested, and 2, just because that's just how TV's made now. Nothing's self-contained. You know, the head writers, Mr. Chibbs in this case, know the story has to be viewed as a whole from beginning to end, and not just one specific run of episodes in the show. I think making it more serialised would go to one of the bigger complaints people have about this particular area of the show, is that it's too crowded. You know, as if the Doctor and 3 companions aren't enough, we've got to have about 25 guest stars and guest characters who are all fighting for screen time and all, for some reason, seem to have like character arcs of their own. You know, there's too much going on. It can be done well, but they're giving themselves too much to do. They're introducing a villain, a world, a planet, new rules every episode. I think if they went for a more serialised route, you know, as the show attempted in 1986 with A Trial of a Time Lord, with, you know, bear with me on this because that doesn't execute it well, but my point still stands. They'll give the supporting cast more time to breathe and take the pressure off feeling like, oh, they haven't done anything this episode, because more than likely is they're going to have something to do next week. I think Doctor Who fans care so much about the state of the show, you know, the viewing figures, are they good, the general perception of the show. It's because there's this inherent fear that it's going to be cancelled again. The show was infamously axed in 1989 after 26 seasons and 7 Doctors. There's deep-rooted horror that if Dawn from down the road doesn't get the reference to episode 4 of the Celestial Toymaker, that the Beaver going to shit themselves and pull the plug. Doctor Who has and always will change with the times. It's a fine line, but it's a balance between the inherent uniqueness of the show, also acknowledge that with the show's unprecedented 60th anniversary coming up, you know, TV's changed and the audience with it. Will the show continue on from series 12 and become more connected, or will it slip back to the more week to week of series 11? You know, I'm inclined to think it's going to sort of carry on the trajectory and just go more mad and be like series 12 times 100, but thankfully there are smarter people, me, running the show, me, who have to make these decisions and not me. Whatever they have planned for the future of Doctor Who, fans are going to be upset anyway, so you might as well make Joe Martin a new Doctor halfway through a series. Why not? You do you, Chibs.